As you may or may not know, I was on the MagicSandwich show this past weekend, and in this video I'm going to talk about a conversation in part that was happening between primarily Hogtiechamp and me. Full link to it down below. This has been heavily edited for time. I'm not trying to misrepresent him. I just want to point out a couple of things. That said, take it away, Hogtiechamp.
I can tell you that I think as a Canadian we've come to a very reasonable position. That position being many more guns per capita than the Americans. I always find it funny.
When you said this and I was on the call, I was thinking, this guy's full of fucking shit. But later in the conversation, you're going to invite me to look into the wiki, so that way I can improve my knowledge, which is apparently deficient. So I decided to go to that wiki to help you get your facts right. 88.8 number of firearms owned per resident in the United States, making it #1 in the world. 30.8 is the number in Canada. 30.8 firearms per 100 residents, making Canada number 13 in the world. Nevertheless, I really do appreciate your having recommended to me this wiki thing, my so infrequently having to use such a device, because I find it very useful to know what I'm talking about before I open my fucking mouth in public. I find it incredibly freeing not to have to do research on the fly. You apparently didn't seem to be similarly constrained, though not doing any of the research on the fly, I do note.
The Americans will tell, oh, you're Canadian, you guys don't have any. Let me tell you what a gun is, because you guys have probably never seen guns. Man, my family, myself, there's more guns around here than you know. And there are lots of types of guns, assault rifles and whatnot, that you just can't own. And we just find it odd that other countries, notably the U.S., treat the ownership of weaponry, that is specifically, this is to shoot people, as somehow a fundamental right.
Pardon me? You said specifically to shoot people? Do you shoot other things with them?
I shoot lots of stuff. I have not shot any people. I've shoot many other things with guns, yes. Yes.
I presume that means things like paper targets, cans, perhaps foul and game, maybe skeet. When any of the things at which you're shooting, sir, start returning fire, come talk to me, sport.
The thing that is specifically designed to shoot people is the thing that you're using not to shoot people, but shoot other things.
Okay. No,
integral. That's one of the worst points you've made so far. There are many.
My learned friend DPR Jones, of all the points I've made, it might well be one of the worst. However, it's still adequate to respond to the limp-dicked argument that's coming my way, namely in that there is a class of weapons that are made specifically for the killing of people, that are available to private persons in the United States. This is a confusion on his part. It's absolutely moronic. It is like saying that hammers are specifically designed for the bludgeoning to death of people, but they just happen to almost always be used for the driving in of nails. He's talking about, the weapons he's talking about, I chose hammers for a reason, are used less frequently to kill people than hammers are. Nevertheless, no one would argue that hammers are specifically designed for the bludgeoning to death of people. They recognize it's a tool, has many uses. The primary one is the one for which it's primarily used, namely the driving in of nails. This class of weaponry, the assault weapons that he's talking about, that are supposedly, primarily, specifically designed for the killing of people, are almost never used for that. They're almost exclusively used for shooting paper targets and hunting. So, by that criteria, these would be hunting weaponry, or target practice weaponry. They would not be specifically designed for the killing of people. Firearms, rifles in particular, are specifically designed for the accurate placing of rounds at a distance. The target to be selected is up to the agent making use of the tool.
That are used for shooting either game shotguns, for example.
Yes, and like the AR-15 is a very common hunting rifle. That would make it a hunting rifle, not a specifically designed for the killing of people rifle, right? Moreover, it's a bit of a nonsense. It's an intellectual confusion, as opposed to the other kinds of confusions, I suppose, to talk about a weapon that's useful for hunting that's not also perfectly useful for the hunting of people.
Rifles that are used for hunting, they're not all designed to shoot people.
Actually, integral. What is a wad cutter?
Designed for the shooting of people. If it can accurately place a round at range, then it is perfectly well designed for animals, of which, the shooting of animals, of which humans are one member. Now, when you ask me about the wad cutter, what is a wad cutter? I was thinking in the back of my head, Qua? And I was thinking that because you're Canadian and I thought it would be funny.
It's a type of bullet.
That does what?
It enters whatever you shoot and does damage to it. I'm not sure what you're driving at here. You're talking.
Well, why would a person use a wad cutter as opposed to a hollow point?
Well, presumably because they would like some penetration.
No.
I said presumably because they would like some penetration. You say nay.
So you really don't have a lot of expertise in what guns are made for, the types of diversity of guns that are out there.
I'm just going to point out for everyone. We were talking about firearms, and pushing up against Hogtiechamp's claim about ones that are specifically designed for the killing of people. He immediately switches to ammunition. So I start engaging him on the ammunition thing, and he immediately switches back to firearms. Sir, you're like a goddamn epileptic rabbit on jumping beans. Nevertheless, I will humor you with my lack of knowledge.
I can tell you the wad cutter is a type of bullet that is designed completely for purposes other than shooting people.
And yet it's a very common round used for self-defense. How can that be?
Now, I mean, to get shot in the face with a wad cutter would probably wreck your day. I'm pretty sure about that. The main feature, wiki wad cutter.
Wiki! Turns out I don't need to. Why? Because I already know what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you hung out on gun forums, which I don't do, but I do read from time to time, then you would find conversations like this. Here's a representative one, SmithandWessonForums.com. Ammunition. Why wad cutters for self-defense? A hard-cast wad cutter is preferred in under-penetrating mouse guns because it permanently cuts through the flesh and bone rather than temporarily just pushing it aside as the Full Metal Jacket does. Here are a couple of wad cutter examples. 1. Most 380 ACP HPs are not good penetrators, and a hardened wad cutter can make up the difference with deeper penetration into the vitals. 380 Auto ACP, Buffalo Bore, 100 grain hardcast flat-nose wad cutter, standard pressure at 910 feet per second, 2.75 inch barrel, item number 27E. Deep cutting penetrator, use FMJ if you have feeding problems. Now what's the feeding problem thing about? Oh right, because it's going in a semi-automatic weapon and wad cutters don't perform well in that. But I'm sure you knew that because you know the subject matter very well, so I guess I'm just explaining that to stupid people like me. 2. The same principle applies to the 38 Special, where in snub-nose form, a heavier bullet or tougher hardcast wad cutter load might be needed to ensure adequate penetration. Sorry. And then it goes through some round specifications. But you don't even need to hang out with just the casuals talking about it. You can go look at the experts, the people who test this kind of shit. Like, oh, I don't know. A test from a few years ago, Handguns Mag. Another advantage of the wad cutter is one you might not think about. And when it says, when the writer says you, I presume he means people like you, the ones who parade your fucking ignorance, as though it's knowledge. Another advantage of the wad cutter is one you might not think about. Penetration. The FBI ballistic gel protocols assume that a bullet must penetrate an absolute minimum of 12 inches of gelatin in order for it to be considered an effective defensive load. Notes on the test. Accuracy tested off of sandbags at 25 yards. Results are averages of 3 5-shot groups. Penetration is averaged of 3 shots with gel surface 10 feet from the muzzle. Velocities measure the CEDM2 chronograph. Screen centered 15 feet from the muzzle. Abbreviations: DEWC, double-end wad cutter. FMJ, full metal jacket. HBWC, hollow-based wad cutter. JHP, jacketed hollow point. And then there's a little chart here, which I didn't have to go to the wiki to find. I just had to scroll up the page and read it. Full metal jacket at 765 feet per second. Penetration of 24 to 28 inches. The hollow point, 735 feet per second, 20 to 24 inches of penetration. I'm sorry, 20 to 24 inches of penetration. Wad cutter 1, 655 feet per second, notably a slower round. 24 to 30 inches of penetration. And the other wad cutter, 657 feet per second, 24 to 36 inches of penetration. Nevertheless, despite my lack of expertise, by the way, I decided to go out shooting, just to see if I could still do it. Weapon system I hadn't touched in years. But I remembered some numbers from my distant past that were extremely important to me at one point in time for some reason that I can't quite remember. And so I twiddled some little knobs on the firearm. That's the size of a nickel. I have all the expertise I need in using a firearm. But let's get back to your particular brand of erudition.
Why would a person use a wad cutter as opposed to a hollow point?
Well, presumably because they would like some penetration.
No. So you really don't have a lot of expertise in what guns are made for, the types of diversity of guns that are out there. I can tell you the wad cutter is a type of bullet that is designed not designed completely for purposes other than shooting people.
And yet it's very commonly used in weapons that are intended to be used for self-defense, because they tend to be small weapons with short barrel lengths, where you need a round that's a deep penetrator, and you without having to have a long barrel to get the power that you need, like what you would need in a hollow point.
Now, I mean, to get shot in the face with a wad cutter would probably wreck your day. I'm pretty sure about that. The main feature, wiki wad cutter, there's a sort of a cutting
You
edge.
asked me the distinction between a hollow point and a wad cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for those who don't know ammo other than armor-piercing Teflon-coated hollow points, can someone actually just tell me what the hell a wad cutter is?
I'm working on it. Yeah, you know, the hollow point has a thing so that it's meant to blow.
That in blowing up thing means the round is expanding, which is reducing the penetration profile. Knowledge that's very common to people who, oddly enough, want to use firearms for their personal defense. Anyway, don't ever try to lecture me on firearms. You mentioned in your country that there's like a pecking order of what kind of weapons you can have access to, or something. I was only half paying attention. But anyway, you would your rating is not nearly as high as what it would be as it's relatively high, but it wouldn't be as high as what it is that the law enforcement or the military would get. Just remember, son, if I lived in your country, you would always be beneath me every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Have a great day, Padawan.